Berlin, December 11th, 1941. The city is cloaked in a cold grey winter fog. Snow crunches underfoot as citizens hurry past streets lined with Nazi banners flapping in the icy wind. Inside the Croll Opera House, the temporary home of Germany's Reichstag, a tense hush falls over the massive chamber. The walls, adorned with ornate frescoes and gilded columns, seem almost to close in as Adolf Hitler steps forward. His presence commands immediate attention. His cheeks are flushed crimson, not just from the winter chill, but from the burning fervor coursing through him. His eyes, intense and feverish, scan the assembly. Every whisper of anticipation seems amplified. The room, packed with Nazi officials, military commanders and propagandists, leans forward as the man they view as the embodiment of Germany's destiny prepares to speak. What he is about to declare will ripple across the globe, reshaping the contours of war and sealing the fate of nations. It is a choice so puzzling, so flagrantly reckless, that historians and military analysts, even decades later, still debate what Hitler was truly thinking in those critical moments. A choice that, at a stroke, transforms what could have been a strategic nightmare into an almost insurmountable catastrophe for Germany. Just 4 days earlier, on December 7th, 1941, news had reached Berlin of Japan's surprise attack on Pearl Harbor. The bombing had catapulted America into a war it had long sought to avoid. Yet for Hitler, sitting in that ornate hall with his generals and ministers, the news didn't carry immediate danger. Germany faced no direct threat from the United States. The U.S. military had not fired upon German soil, and no American forces were massing in Europe. From a strictly strategic standpoint, Hitler could have remained silent, observing from the sidelines as Japan and America clashed, potentially weakening each other, while Germany concentrated every ounce of energy on the Eastern Front against the Soviet Union. Instead, Hitler chose the unthinkable. He opened his mouth, and with the commanding force that had hypnotized the Reichstag before, declared war on the United States. "Germany is now at war with America," he bellowed, his voice echoing off the grand, vaulted ceilings. The chamber erupted in applause. Military commanders, swept up in the fervor, leapt to their feet, clapping and cheering. Joseph Goebbels, the Reich's propaganda chief, beamed with unrestrained delight, already envisioning the headlines, the posters, the speeches that would stoke German pride. At that moment, the room was a tableau of triumph, but the reality outside these walls was far grimmer. With that declaration, Hitler effectively signed Germany's own death warrant. He had turned a dangerous but survivable conflict into a war on multiple fronts against two global powers whose combined industrial and military potential far exceeded his own. Within 4 short years, the consequences of that decision would become brutally clear. Berlin reduced to rubble, the Nazi government in ruins, and Hitler himself ending his life in a bunker beneath a city consumed by fire and destruction. To truly understand why this announcement was so catastrophic, we must examine Germany's situation in December 1941 with careful precision. The German military machine, which until recently had seemed unstoppable, was already in crisis. The Wehrmacht's campaign against the Soviet Union, known as Operation Barbarossa, had begun in June 1941 with the rapid blitzkrieg tactics that had previously overwhelmed Poland, France, and other nations. Hitler had believed the Soviet Union would collapse almost immediately. He had envisioned Moscow falling within weeks, Stalin's regime crumbling like a house of cards. But reality had a different plan. By early December, the German advance had ground to a halt. Soldiers were freezing in the open steppes, their boots cracking in temperatures plummeting to -40 degrees Celsius. Engines refused to start. Snow and ice clogged artillery, immobilized tanks, and slowed supply lines to a crawl. On December 1st, 1941, Following a crushing defeat in the southern sector of the Eastern Front, Hitler fired Field Marshal von Rundstedt. German troops, stretched thin and exhausted, were beginning to lose ground to a Red Army that, contrary to Hitler's assumptions, had not only survived the initial onslaught, but was receiving reinforcements from Siberia. The nightmare that German commanders had long feared was unfolding. Germany, the seemingly invincible force, was finally being pushed back, forced to defend against a counterattack that threatened to annihilate their hard-won positions outside Moscow. In the midst of this struggle, Hitler's decision to confront an entirely new adversary, America, was incomprehensible. Strategic prudence demanded restraint. Germany's survival rested on overwhelming the Soviets before winter fully set in. The Wehrmacht needed every soldier, every tank, every aircraft, and every logistical resource to maintain its crumbling front. Yet Hitler's ambitions, fueled by arrogance and a fundamental misjudgment of reality, could not tolerate inaction. Hitler's miscalculations about America were central to this error. He convinced himself that the United States was weak, fractured, and incapable of meaningful military action. He saw a nation divided by isolationism, still grappling with the scars of the Great Depression, and riddled with internal strife over racial tensions and labor disputes. He assumed Americans lacked the resolve to fight a prolonged conflict, that their factories and industrial capacity could never be mobilized effectively, and that their soldiers would be untested and inadequate. The reality, as history would soon demonstrate, was the exact opposite. The United States in 1941 possessed the largest industrial capacity in the world, a manufacturing base capable of producing war material at an unparalleled rate. While German aircraft production totaled around 5,000 planes annually, the United States, once fully mobilized, would construct 96,000 in a single year. German tank production over the entire war amounted to roughly 40,000 units, while American factories would produce 88,000 in just a few years. Submarine production tells a similar story. Germany launched roughly 1,000 submarines over 6 years, but the U.S. deployed 400 in under 3 years, alongside a completely rebuilt navy of carriers, battleships, destroyers, and amphibious assault vessels. In December 1941, much of this potential remained dormant, seemingly at rest. America's military numbered only 1.6 million soldiers, smaller than Germany's standing forces and even fewer than Britain's. Their tanks were inferior to German panzers. American pilots had little to no combat experience. On paper, Hitler's assumption of American weakness seemed superficially plausible, but it ignored the latent power lying beneath the surface, a giant waiting to awaken. Had Hitler remained silent, the course of history might have been dramatically different. The US would have been forced to focus almost entirely on Japan, pursuing revenge for Pearl Harbor while leaving Europe largely untouched. Roosevelt, desperate to prioritize Germany, would have faced immense domestic opposition. The American people, still seething over the attack on Pearl Harbor, were emotionally fixated on avenging Japan, not preparing for a continental war against Germany. In this sense, Hitler handed Roosevelt a gift of immense strategic value. By declaring war, he united American public opinion behind a European-first strategy, transforming what could have been a localized Pacific conflict into a truly global confrontation. Why, then, did Hitler make this fateful choice? Accounts from his naval aide, Admiral Karl Jesko von Puttkamer, suggest that the news of Pearl Harbor initially emboldened Hitler. He believed the Japanese strike would help Germany, viewing it as a timely reinforcement that coincided with his perceived opportunity to crush the Soviets. He assumed America's Pacific focus would keep its resources occupied, preventing intervention in Europe. In Hitler's mind, Japan would sweep across Asia, neutralize China, and perhaps in some fantastical scenario, turn northward to attack the Soviet Union, trapping Stalin between German and Japanese forces. Every assumption was disastrously wrong. Japan had no intention of confronting the Soviet Union again after their defeat at Khalkhin Gol in 1939. Their forces moved southward, seeking the riches of Southeast Asia, not north into Siberia. The American Navy, despite suffering a stunning blow at Pearl Harbor, remained a formidable force. Its carriers had survived the attack and would, within 6 months, deliver a devastating defeat to Japan at Midway, shifting the balance in the Pacific, even in the Atlantic. German forces had already encountered the United States. Hitler despised Roosevelt, whose speeches consistently condemned Nazi ideology and anti-Semitic policies. Unbeknownst to Hitler, American destroyers had already begun escorting convoys and engaging German U-boats, resulting in the sinking of vessels like the USS Reuben James and USS Kearney in October and November 1941. A shadow war was underway even before the formal declaration. But Hitler interpreted these events as justification for preemptive aggression rather than a warning of the industrial and military giant he was about to awaken. In the Croll Opera House that December day, the claps, the cheers, the smiles, especially Goebbels' manic glee, masked the grim reality of the strategic blunder being formalized in real time. Hitler's declaration of war on the United States was not merely a political gesture. It was the opening of a Pandora's box of consequences that Germany would never recover from. Every subsequent battle, every lost city, every exhausted soldier and shattered tank would trace back to this single, catastrophic decision. By choosing to awaken the sleeping giant of American industry and military might, Hitler ensured that Germany's war would no longer be confined to Europe. He had turned a fragile, precarious advantage into a global nightmare. And all of it, Germany's ultimate defeat, the destruction of Berlin, the death of millions, was sealed in that fiery, echoing declaration inside the ornate Croll Opera House on December 11th, 1941. Hitler believed fighting America was going to happen no matter what. If it was unavoidable, he figured, might as well do it now while he could control the timing and still had momentum. Better to declare war as a power move than wait around for Roosevelt to do it. This logic completely ignored a massive reality. Roosevelt didn't have the political backing to declare war on Germany. Congress wouldn't authorize it. The American public wouldn't get behind it. As long as Hitler didn't directly attack American territory, Roosevelt's options were extremely limited. By declaring war first, Hitler eliminated Roosevelt's biggest political barrier. He gave the president precisely what he'd been hoping for. Then there was the Tripartite Pact to think about. In September 1940, Hitler and Mussolini signed a mutual defense agreement called the Tripartite Pact with Japan. 6 months after that, in April 1941, Hitler went even further, promising Japan complete support if a Japanese-American war broke out. Regardless of who started it, technically speaking, the Tripartite Pact only required Germany to back Japan if Japan got attacked, not if Japan was the one doing the attacking. Since Japan had launched the first strike at Pearl Harbor, Germany wasn't legally bound to jump into the war. But Hitler had given Japan private assurances either way. He wanted to push Japanese expansion throughout Asia, thinking it would hurt Britain and keep American attention divided. Now Japan had come through. They'd landed a devastating hit on America. In Hitler's thinking, both honor and strategy demanded that Germany return the favor. If he didn't declare war now, if he left Japan hanging after they'd taken such a gamble, what kind of partner would that make him look like? How could he keep credibility with his other allies? This obsession with credibility made Hitler blind to the bigger strategic reality. Alliance credibility meant absolutely nothing if protecting that credibility guaranteed Germany would lose. On the morning of December 11th, Hitler gave a speech to the Reichstag where he accused Roosevelt of pushing for war and plotting against Germany. German Foreign Minister Joachim von Ribbentrop sat down with American chargé d'affaires Leland Morris to officially hand over the war declaration. According to diplomat George Kennan, after Morris finished reading it, Ribbentrop shouted at him, "Your president has wanted this war. Now he has it." Then he spun around and stormed out. The actual war declaration document was pure propaganda and fantasy. It blamed Roosevelt for repeatedly provoking Germany. It catalogued American violations of staying neutral, American attacks on German submarines, and American aid to Britain through Lend-Lease. It painted Germany as the innocent victim, America as the attacker, and the war declaration as necessary self-defense. None of this altered the basic truth. Germany had just willingly jumped into a war it had no way of winning. In Washington, when word of Germany's declaration reached the White House, Roosevelt must have felt like someone just handed him an incredible present. Roosevelt had drafted a short message to Congress on the morning of December 11th, requesting they declare war on Germany and Italy. When they met at noon, it sailed through both chambers without a single vote against it. No arguments, no long discussions, no drama. Congress approved fighting Germany with a vote of 393-0 in the House, 88-0 in the Senate. The whole thing was over in less than an hour. Think about how different things were just 4 days before that. After Pearl Harbor, Roosevelt had asked Congress to declare war on Japan. They approved it, but several isolationist members of Congress wanted to know why America should bother fighting Germany too. Roosevelt couldn't give them a convincing answer. Public rage was aimed at Japan, not Germany. If Hitler had just kept quiet, if he'd let America and Japan battle it out, Roosevelt would have been under massive political pressure to focus only on the Pacific. The Germany first approach that Roosevelt and Churchill had privately agreed on would have been politically impossible to carry out. But Hitler's declaration flipped everything. Now America could justify making Germany the main target because Germany had declared war on America first. Hitler had solved Roosevelt's political headache for him. Within a few weeks, American military strategists were coordinating with their British counterparts to lock down plans for invading North Africa, for launching massive bombing raids against German cities, and for the eventual cross-channel invasion that would turn into D-Day. None of this would have been achievable, or at minimum not achievable this quickly, if Hitler hadn't declared war. The effect of America entering the war hit immediately, and with overwhelming force. On top of its ongoing battles in the Soviet Union and North Africa, Nazi Germany now had to prepare for millions of American soldiers entering the fight, along with millions of tons of weapons and supplies pouring into Allied hands. Germany's manufacturing was already maxed out. They were fighting an enormous ground war in the Soviet Union, struggling to hold North Africa against the British, defending occupied France and neighboring countries, and running a submarine operation in the Atlantic. Now they'd have to deal with American factories pumping out weapons and ammunition faster than Germany could match. American shipyards building new ships quicker than German submarines could sink them. American training facilities preparing millions of troops for deployment to Europe. The strategic advantage had swung decisively away from Germany, and it was completely Hitler's doing. He'd thrown away Germany's final opportunity to negotiate any kind of favorable peace deal, or at least reach a stalemate in Europe. With America in the fight, Germany losing was just a matter of when, not if, but Hitler didn't understand it that way. In his December 11th speech to the Reichstag, he was celebrating, confident, mocking America's strength. He ridiculed Roosevelt as a puppet of Jewish bankers. He dismissed American military power as a joke. He predicted Germany and Japan would demolish their enemies and build a completely new world order. The Reichstag gave him a standing ovation. His generals clapped enthusiastically. Not a single person stood up to say this was madness. Nobody mentioned that Germany was now simultaneously fighting the three most powerful nations on the planet: the Soviet Union, the British Empire, and the United States. Meanwhile, Germany's only major ally, Italy, was turning out to be more of a burden than any real help. If anyone in that room grasped how catastrophic Hitler's mistake was, they stayed silent. The results of Hitler's declaration became obvious over the next few years. In 1942, American forces hit the beaches in North Africa, creating another battleground that bled German resources dry. In 1943, American and British bombers started around-the-clock strategic attacks on German cities and factories, destroying production capacity and forcing Germany to pull fighter planes and anti-aircraft weapons away from the Eastern Front. In 1944, American troops stormed Normandy, freeing France and driving toward Germany. By 1945, Germany was encircled, running out of supplies, running out of choices, getting crushed between Soviet armies pushing in from the east and American and British forces pushing in from the west. Would Germany have actually won the war if Hitler hadn't declared war on America? Almost certainly not. The Soviet Union was too massive, too determined, too well-equipped to be conquered. Britain wasn't going to give up. But Germany could have held out longer. They might have been able to work out a separate peace deal with the Western powers, leaving Germany and the Soviet Union to keep fighting each other. They definitely wouldn't have faced the crushing industrial and military weight that American involvement brought down on them. By declaring war on December 11th, 1941, Hitler made absolutely certain that Germany would face America's complete power. He guaranteed the war wouldn't stop until Germany was totally defeated, taken over, and broken apart. He sealed the doom of Nazi Germany and the fate of millions who would lose their lives in the years of warfare that came. After December 11th, 1941, the day Hitler made his most catastrophic decision. The day he picked a fight with the one country that could guarantee his complete destruction. The day he eliminated any chance of German success and locked in the annihilation of the Third Reich